Let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for the day. Pray that you'll bless our time together today as we discuss some pretty heavy topics. Keep us in mind, though, that you are the one that's in control of everything. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today we're going to call this, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up on the screens here. There we go. Thank you. Artificial intelligence, not real wisdom. The only reason I used that, and I thought I was going to talk some about artificial intelligence, but I just don't have the time today. As I shared first hour, by the way, I apologize for starting late. The guy who preached first hour went way over, and he has a tendency to do that, and he will be severely criticized when I get him home today. But there were some important things we had to say as we talked about the road to Emmaus. So if you want to look about that, a little archaeology, Bible prophecy, that type of thing, a very important passage in the book of Luke as we continued. And I think we're in our next to last session on Life of Messiah. Pastor Charles will be back in 2 weeks to do that next week. Sean, Patrick, and who is it? Yohani will be here from Malawi to speak. Great people, great ministry. And just as a reminder, generative AI was not used in the research or preparation of this update. And by the way, I appreciate people sharing with me, but now everybody's doing ChatGPT things and they're sending me their results. And I appreciate that. I just don't have time to read through it. And somebody sent me a couple books this week, wanted me to review that. I'm not sure what the answer is. So just a little update on me. I will be doing a conference in Calgary, Canada, the first weekend in May. Last Day's Bible Conference, ldbc.ca is the website. I think registration might be open for that in Calgary. May 5th and 6th, I think, are the dates. And then in June 16th to the 18th, I'll be doing a conference for Moriel at I think it's called Gartmore House in about 35 miles north of Glasgow, Sweden, up in the Scottish Highlands. I promise not to wear a kilt, unless, it comes with free golf. I mean, I might do that. But anyway, and I'll also be speaking at church in the Yorkshire area, and I'll have more details on that as I get that firmed up the weekend prior to that, it looks like. So we talk about the convergence of events, and boy, I tell you, some weeks there's so much stuff going on. It happens. This is the grid that I use: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And it's kind of interesting that everybody's talking about convergence now. All of these things happening at once, power problems, that type of thing. And we know that the scripture tells us that as we get closer to the end, we will have a clearer picture of how everything's going to work out. I think we're still in the time frame where we're still trying to figure it out. And that's fine. That's okay. We're all waiting for the Lord to return. And, or we know that if we don't make it that long, we will be with the Lord. That's if you're a child of His. And that's something that we look forward to. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some cultural things. Then we will go into some things about the Middle East. I don't think that I'm going to, if I do a midweek update this week, and I said last week I was going to do a midweek update, but I got busy. There was a nice day. I spent another day doing work around the house. So I did not get a midweek update, and then I did the sermon first hour. So that cut into a lot of my prep time. And the subjects, sometimes they get a little bit too heavy and overwhelming, and I just as soon not talk about it. So let's look at some things going on. Now, we always talk about identity, central bank digital currencies, digital ID, and that type of thing. You need to know, most of you already have a digital ID, whether you like it or not. You got a phone, you got bank accounts, you got a digital ID. And so a lot of the push at places like the World Economic Forum and the UN to get everybody a digital ID is related to the 1 or 2 billion people in the world who don't have one yet. But there's enough information out there about everybody that they can probably track you. And so this is a country, this is Estonia. They have been using digital ID for a number of years. And it says here in the headline, this is from the Times of the UK, the nation with one card for everything. And there are about 600 services that are tied to government and other services like health and that sort of thing in Estonia that are tied to the digital ID that you get at birth. And so this is now it's a small country. I think they might have 1.5 million people. By the way, they're not too happy. I saw another article today that Estonia does not, maybe it was Latvia. It's one of the Baltic states. They don't want peace with Russia because they're afraid what Russia's going to do. If Russia isn't tied up at Ukraine, Russia will come after them next, they're afraid. I don't know if you've been following this. This is kind of interesting. I think one of the speakers at the Calgary conference is Carl Kirby. I'm sure he'll speak on creationism. And you remember there was the Hubble telescope a number of years ago focused on a section of the sky that they thought was empty. And it was just this like little tiny window. And it sat there and it took picture, over time, several weeks, I think it was. And when they analyzed the photographs, what did they discover? Here's what they thought was empty space. And they found thousands and thousands and thousands of galaxies with billions and billions of stars in each one. And they're like, whoa. Well, now they have this new, now I can't remember the name of this thing. Maybe it's in the James Webb Space Telescope is now in full operation. This is from The Atlantic, secular, center-left magazine. Writes some good stuff, writes some real garbage at times. But it's one of the ones where I try to at least look at it occasionally. After Hubble, astronomers felt pretty confident that they understood galaxies and how nature makes them. But some new startling developments have recently popped up, courtesy of a space telescope far more powerful than Hubble. The James Webb Space Telescope, in full operation since last summer, has shown that galaxies formed much sooner after the Big Bang than scientists previously thought, and that some of them are unexpectedly large, absolutely brimming with stars. The findings have thrown scientists into a new reality in which their existing theories no longer apply. So here's the governing theory of everything. God made it all, and God is so far beyond your comprehension that you can't begin to understand him. And what happens if you look at the history of science, when people really start to try to get into this unifying theory of everything, for example, later in his life, Sir Isaac Newton, who had written some pretty good Bible commentaries, really, I think, got to the place where he couldn't explain it, so he kind of turned to mysticism in some respects. You can find it in his later writings. Now, I know that's not popular, but that's what happened. But this happens all the time. They think they discovered everything. Remember, they used to say when they first discovered the cell, it was just this little blob of stuff. Now it's like this incredible factory with machines and all these things that work on a molecular level. And it's hard to even fathom how complicated it is. And we think, oh, well, we're going to design robots to tell us everything that happens. Everyone in the astronomy community in the Atlantic, it says, knew that the Webb telescope was going to be revolutionary. And we had a very clear list of things that we thought Webb would totally blow our socks off about. Joel Leja, an astronomer at Penn State University, told me. But the discovery of cosmically chunky galaxies where there shouldn't be any, this was nowhere on it. No one was looking for this. And so what they found is that these galaxies far away, well, these must have been created shortly after the Big Bang, and they shouldn't have formed that much. But now they're looking at them, they're finding they're really formed, and they have billions and billions and billions of stars in each galaxy, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And their theories were there wouldn't be any there. Now, they always say, well, our theories are good enough that we can explain this until the next one. What's it going to be next time? And that Webb telescope hasn't even been up there this much. Now, Pam and I have spent a lot of time in California, and they have had incredible amounts of rain and snow this year. I read that the snowpack at Yosemite right now is 15 feet. There is another place in the Sierras that had recorded 543 inches of snow this year. That's like, 46 feet. That's a lot of snow. And so they're thinking that a lot of California's water problems could be taken care of in one winter. We'll see. We don't know. In Europe, now Europe was going to have a big energy crisis. Prices were way up. And what happened was that over the last 6 weeks, temperatures have been like 20 to 30 degrees above normal. So, yay, global warming. But now they're talking about that this is one of these things that happens. There's no good news. So the good news is it's warmer than expected. We didn't need as much energy. We haven't depleted our supplies, our stored supplies like we thought. We're able to build them up. But then the question is, what are they going to do next winter? Because they may have tapped all the resources that they have to get their winter supplies built up. And what happens if it's a cold, brutal winter next year? So the world's not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination. And they're now thinking that the warm winter could cause a food crisis. What's up with that? Look at what the lead paragraph says in this article. This is from the Times of London. Italian mozzarella and French beef could be harder to find on British supermarket shelves after one of the warmest winters on record in Europe raised the risk of food and water shortages this summer. France and Spain have started imposing water restrictions, with farmers warning of heavy crop losses unless there is steady rain in the spring. The French shortage is obvious from the lack of snow at lower ski resorts to dusty fields in the Paris region. In Spain, local authorities have limited car washing and the filling of swimming pools. In Venice, I think I showed a picture of this last week, gondolas and water taxis have been grounded because of the low water levels in the Grand Canal and other waterways. So the warm weather comes, yay for warm weather, but that's a problem. And this is again from the UK. Supermarket fruit and vegetable crisis is set to last 3 or 4 weeks. They're limiting how much you can buy. Now, I do a lot of the shopping in our home, not because I'm just a greatest husband ever, but because I get to eat what I want for the most part. But look at some of these prices are up in the UK. Tomatoes 22%, lettuce 30%, leeks 25%. Cauliflower is 38%. And I noticed this too in our shopping. It's like I found some steaks for $4.99 or $5.99 a pound. And I thought, that's a steal. Well, a year and a half ago, I would have said, they're stealing my money. And now I'm trained that when it's $5.99 on sale, that's a great deal. So I've been trained. Potatoes up 20%. By the way, if you like turnips, I don't know. There's a few things in my life that one of the great joys of becoming an adult, when I reached 18 and went off to college, I haven't had a lima bean in 50 years. And I've never had a turnip. Knowingly. Somebody might have stuck one by me one time. This is also this continual problem, sort of the insanity of our times. They're saying, well, maybe we're not going to make that 2035 cutoff where everything's going to be electric. And there's a problem with electric is they don't have the infrastructure built to do all the batteries and charging. And now I've seen places where they restrict battery charging on your vehicle, the electric vehicle that they're going to make you all buy or maybe rent. This was an editorial earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal, SOS for the U.S. electric grid. Our grid is not in great shape. We're having what appear to be terrorist attacks with regular basis attacking the grid, hundreds of these things happening. Some homegrown terrorist groups, don't know if there are some foreign actors involved or other people involved that want to make it difficult, but this is a big problem. Dave Walsh was on War Room the other day, and so I'm going to play just a little bit of his discussion about this editorial with Natalie Winters.
Dave, while I have you until we finish the show, I want to talk more about that Wall Street Journal piece because I think it's interesting for them to be admitting that an SOS, right, a potentially very, very precarious energy situation could be coming, especially as we're pushing for climate reparations from the West when we don't even have our own house in order. It's a tale as old as time. I think about, right, the southern border, defending Ukraine, right? Let's focus on America first. But the elites just don't seem to want to do that. So what's exactly going on here? Are there potential energy shortages coming? What should the War Room posse know?
Well, there are shortages already in the country in the ERCOT market, which is the Texas grid, ERCOT, under the FERC system. In California, we're widely familiar with the electricity shortages there, growing in Minnesota, Colorado. Over Christmas in North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, they appeared. And these are happening increasingly because of the lack of or the teardown of baseload continuous duty electricity plants, being coal plants. Country's reduced about 110,000 megawatts, about a third of its coal-fired generation in the last 10 years, and a good scale, a portion of its nuclear capacity has been shut down in favor of solar, wind. Some gas-fired technology has replaced that, which runs all the time, and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, that which has been replaced with this intervention of solar and wind, that stuff runs wind about 3/8 of the time on a 75% daily variability. You don't know when you're going to have it. Solar runs about 14 to 20% of the time. Again, massive intraday variability depending on cloud cover. You don't know when you're going to have it. The important thing for everybody to remember, this electricity thing, unlike a barrel of oil or water in a reservoir, it's not stored up. It's just like the generator attached to back up your house. If that thing runs out of fuel, you're done immediately. The big system works exactly the same way. So there has to be generating capacity spinning way in excess of demand for the lights to stay on. When it becomes very hot, demand goes up. When it becomes very cold, demand goes up for heating. And that's why that there's something called reserve margin, about 26% buffer on top of the peak demand of producing more electricity continuously to have the system work. There really isn't a notion of large-scale storage that's yet been developed. So we're seeing now in the PJM region, which is Pennsylvania, Virginia, parts of New Jersey, Maryland, announcements that in the next 4 years, look out, could be brownouts and service curtailments because they're tearing down, removing 20,000 megawatts, a huge portion of nuclear and coal, displacing it with some gas, but a lot with renewables that again work a very partial part of the day. So you have, because of that, a far lower electricity density, far lower energy being supplied into the electricity system on a predictable basis, lower, therefore, reserve margins, therefore more brownouts and blackouts potentially occurring.
So I would vote if I could vote for the Secretary of Energy in the next administration, I would be that guy. Because he understands what's going on, other than these lunatics that we have running things like cutting back on oil exploration, cutting back on power plants, and everything, all under the name of green energy and 15-minute cities and all these things. They're absolute lunatics. Now, sometimes people talk about the prophecy in Ezekiel 38, coming with horsemen and everything, and maybe the world goes back, to the sort of a medieval time frame in terms of what people are able to do, and maybe horses are what's used to invade. I don't know. We'll have to see. So, in Ohio, we have Republicans control both legislatures, both houses of the legislature. They have veto-proof majorities. We have a Republican governor. But we have an ability of people to submit constitutional amendments if they get enough to put it on the ballot for people to vote. Now, the Republicans are trying to change that. There's been a lot of infighting among the Republicans. It's hard to believe the Republicans are fighting with each other in the Ohio legislature. I'm shocked by all this. But they have now submitted a 2023 ballot measure to the Attorney General of Ohio pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code. The undersigned electors of the state of Ohio, numbering in excess of 1,000, hereby submit to you the full text of a proposed amendment to the Ohio Constitution and a summary of the same. So it's really hard. I dug and dug and dug to find out exactly what the language of the constitutional amendment is, and I really haven't found it. They submit a summary of what they want, and the summary is what appears on the ballot. So it's very important that the summary accurately reflect what's in the amendment, or it will be struck down later by the court. And this comes from a group, A Message to Our Patients on the Loss of Reproductive Rights. And you can see all those little dots there. Those are signatures and names of doctors. And this is what pops up on their website, Doctors for Reproductive Freedom, codify abortion. So even though the Dobbs decision gave the states the right to choose how they would deal with abortions, there's a couple of attacks going on. One attack is people are saying, well, the Supreme Court said that the U.S. Constitution says this, but our state constitution recognizes the right to privacy and right to abortion. So they're attacking it that way, and then they're going in and they're submitting these constitutional amendments, ballot initiatives, and that type of thing. Kansas and I think Kentucky voted in favor of pro-abortion measures recently. North Carolina has become, but that's what they say, codify abortion. And so look at some of the language that they use. Now, these are doctors, the do no harm, Hippocratic oath. It should be hypocritical oath, I think, at this point. The decision to perform an abortion should left be solely to a woman and her physician. Doctors are guided by evidence-based medicine and are bound by our commitment to do no harm. The heartbeat bill is an intrusion of government on personal autonomy and will directly lead to oppression, illness, and death of countless women. This is baloney. It's a big, fat lie. I saw another thing. It was another article. I don't think I have a copy of it today. By the way, you're getting to the place where if you don't measure up, if you don't meet the standards that the doctor has set, they're not going to take care of you. Now, what do you think is going to be one of the big issues? They've actually added codes that if you haven't had certain medical treatment, it's going to be reflected on your medical records. And you know it's the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector. So if you don't have, there are codes now, diagnostic codes. I don't know why they need to diagnose that. But this is, and you're going to get to the place, it's going to be part of a social credit system, where if you don't meet the standards, then you may even have to go to an education class on certain issues, like reproductive freedom. LGBTQ things. And if you don't go to the class, the doctor's going to say, I'm not going to take care of you. I mean, we are at that stage. This will disproportionately affect women of color and individuals without the financial means to seek other options. I would say the opposite is true. Abortion disproportionately affects women of color, people of color, because they have disproportionately large percentage. So let's say they're 15% of the population. They have 50 or 60% of the abortions. This is what Planned Parenthood was designed to do. By the way, do you know that Planned Parenthood now is making millions and millions of dollars being an outlet for transgender treatment? And they call it Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's just, anyone who supports this legislation, the doctors say, is complicit in the greatest assault on women's rights in our lifetime. We demand that Ohio House Bill 258, Senate Bill 23 be repealed. We ask our elected officials to defend the separation of church and state, to support reproductive autonomy. Let me tell you what, this is hypocritical. It's not Hippocratic, it's hypocritical, because a lot of them go to churches that support abortion. So what about the separation of church and state there? This argument I hear all the time, you can't legislate morality. That's baloney. All laws are somebody's version of morality. Every single law enacted. You should pay more taxes. You shouldn't drive 100 miles an hour in a school zone. Those are all moral choices that they're codifying in the law. So a group of clinics represented by the ACLU of Ohio withdrew their federal constitutional challenge. They were challenging the Ohio laws on federal constitutional grounds. Supreme Court ruled, and the ACLU said, okay, that part of our lawsuit is gone. Just strike it out of our complaint. But now we're filing it under the Ohio Constitution. And you better hope you have the right mix of judges on the Ohio Supreme Court, or you're going to have a problem. Because from certain parties, they'll legislate from the bench, and that's an issue here. And I would say it's an issue in Israel because it's happening. I've watched it happen for decades. I know it's happening in the United States. I know it's happening in Israel. Now the question is, how do you deal with it? That's where the big argument becomes. It says here, after a judge again blocked Ohio's near-abortion ban while that lawsuit proceeds, Attorney General Yost appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court to lift that stay. The High Court, nearly constituted with a more conservative Republican majority than it had before, has yet to rule on this request. But Yost had to come out under his constitutional duty and say, look, we have the language in their abortion protection petition that they want to put on the ballot accurately reflects what the constitutional provision says. So it's going to be on the ballot. So just be aware of that. Now I'm going to show you a video. Well, here's a video. This is a pastor, and a little bit dear to my heart, a little bit, because I'm going to be speaking in Calgary in a couple months, 2 months from today. And here's a pastor. He went to one of the public library in Calgary. They were having a drag queen story hour. And he protested. And so this is what happened. You'll see him in just a second. Here he comes, walking out of sort of walking out of the meeting.
We have the police coming.
We've called the police.
To leave or deal with the police.
Now, what you're going to see here in the next video is, this happened a couple weeks ago. He was actually arrested at home. Here's the Calgary police. Showing up at his door.
Why are you showing up at my home?
I don't know if you guys can turn that up a little bit.
Yeah, you guys could call me, or we could.
So was that?
You could have called me.
I've been trying to.
We did try to call you.
Yeah, what time is it? No, she's okay.
We need to talk about what happened on the weekend at Seaton, right?
Why do we need to talk about it?
Because you're going to be arrested for it and charged.
Well, anyway, what they tell them is, listen,
Okay.
you come with us now or we'll go get a warrant. And we already have warrants.
Charged with what?
And so here's another, this is from Rebel News, a little bit about what happened. This is after they took him out of the house. Now, mind you, he was thrown out of a meeting. He's being arrested and handcuffed.
They're working here. I'm not going to obstruct them.
Why? Derek Reimer's his name.
Don't worry, I'm not going to run. I'm not worried about you. We're just going to stay out of their workspace.
You mind if I ask you what he's being arrested for?
Are you going to provide your identification?
Pardon?
Will you provide your ID?
It's for you to answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is he being arrested?
His warrants.
Warrants out for his arrest? Multiple, so that's 2 I believe?
I don't know.
Okay, do you know what the warrants are for? Wow. Am I allowed to continue on the sidewalk as this lady is walking on the sidewalk? It doesn't look like she's disrupting. Thank you very much.
So here's the question is, what happened to the police? Have they all been lobotomized? And I say that, I'm going to be in Calgary. By the way, officially, I hope that all that white stuff is gone by the time I get there. It can stay in the mountains, that's fine. So what you find, though, is by the way, this is what, as he was getting ready to drive away, well, here, let me go back to the video. Hang on a second here. Okay, you're gonna see a shot of him in the police car.
If people want to help you, where do they go?
They can go and contact Rebel. They're providing me with a lawyer. This is what happens when we go against the Drake.
Is this unbelievable? Look at what that looks like. The bars. He was thrown out of a meeting. And he gets arrested. You know, it reminds me of that, I hate to say it, I repent of having watched it, the Beverly Hills Cop. Eddie Murphy gets thrown through a plate glass window and they arrest him for littering. I got thrown through a window. Yeah, but you littered. Look at all the broken glass you left laying around. It's absolute insanity. And so part of this comes, oh, here we go. I thought I had more on this. So this is the mayor of Calgary. And you always know, personal account, and she's got to put her pronouns in. So you kind of know where she's coming from. Wait, none of my accounts have my pronouns. Figure it out. Okay? And so here's what she said. I'll be unpacking the reasons why enforcement teams in the Crown feel the street harassment bylaw and other existing bylaws legislation are not strong enough to charge demonstrators who spread vile lies and hatred in public. And then I'll be pushing for more. No more excuses. Asking me to be patient and saying, we got this, didn't work. We have performers being targeted for weeks and now vitriol in front of children at the library. We're a very divided culture in North America and around the world. This is a big issue. This is hate. The kind of hate we rallied against for so long. It's back and it's worse. Why is this worse? Because we are pretending we can't take action against it. So why do you think this guy got arrested in Calgary for saying that or protesting this? You think the mayor had anything to do with it? Well, yeah, she and her lobotomized policeman. I don't know. I hope that guy was embarrassed for standing there, because the guy who was filming it is obstructing, but a lady walking down the sidewalk is okay. It's political, my friends. I talked about this somewhat in the first hour. So we can talk about revivals and all this stuff, but it's getting real. This is getting real. The messy persecution part of Christianity is coming, and you better get ready for it. And consider it a blessing. That's the attitude. I will be posting more on what I uncover about the weakness of our existing bylaws and legislation. I'll let you know what we can all do to demand better. It starts with me. I hold the greatest responsibility for this city to be a place of inclusion. Now, somebody asked, I thought this was a great question. Are you okay with the future mayor with the opposite views of you using these powers to find BLM and pro-Palestinian left-wing demonstrations, protests? Remember, you're not going to be mayor forever, and someone who has the opposite view to you can use the same methods. And then there was this kind of back and forth. This person, somebody says, I personally don't care about these drag shows, but why would any parent take their kids to one? And then Dr. Melina Rodzakowska says, have you been? They're awesome. He says, no, but I've seen a few videos online. I would prefer to take my kids to Telespark Museum or Banff. That's a national park. I don't think it's an either-or situation, she says. Then somebody says, why would you take your kids to watch a grown man perform his fetish? Super weird. And this is her description. Making stuff, oh, here they are, she, her. Social media is not my workplace and not owned by my employer. Settler on treaty land. So you can tell where she's coming from. This is coming everywhere. This is also parents who fear their 11-year-olds will be scarred for life by the graphic sex education that lessons that no one wanted. And this is from the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, or Guardian. I don't remember which one. Parents are concerned about their kids. Here's an article from the Times, Wednesday, March 1st. Parents halt sex education by drag queen. I hope so. Trans U-turn is belated victory for free speech. After years of all but ignoring an epidemic of gender dysphoria, the New York Times will allow journalists to report on it. And the New York Times is being shredded on social media because they're going to allow people to present the other side of the issue. And there's an epidemic of this. And Abigail Schreier, in an article back in 2021, she wrote about this. There's been studies done of like whole classrooms, a large chunk of classrooms of teenage girls all come in demand to have puberty-blocking hormones, get testosterone. And it's like a group thing. And people are noting it, and it's like, well, what could be bad about Drag Queen Story Hour? I mean, I don't understand why that would be bad. I saw a good art. There's an older article, I think, from 1997. I saw somebody posted it on Facebook, and a friend of mine. It was from Answers in Genesis, and it talked about the sterilization that took place back in the 20s and 30s. Thousands and thousands of people sterilized by doctors, educated doctors who'd taken the do no harm oath because they thought they were improving society by getting rid of the lesser classes. By the way, I'm totally opposed to that. I don't support that. I wouldn't take an award from a lady who supported that, like Hillary Clinton has, if you paid me Hillary Clinton money to do it. It's unbelievable. So this was Representative Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House now, who had a woman who come to talk about her personal experience with the school board when she was asking, hey, what are you teaching my 5-year-old about sex? Listen to this.
Afternoon. My name is Nicole Solis, and I am a mother from Rhode Island who was sued by the teachers union simply because I wanted to know what my kindergartner would be learning in school. And here's how this happened. I asked to see the curriculum, and my school told me I had to submit a public records request. The curriculum wasn't posted online, and it wasn't available in a school district. Then I asked them if they were teaching gender theory, and they told me that they don't call children boys and girls, and they embed the values of gender identity into every classroom, including kindergarten, and they didn't want to answer any of my questions further. They told me that they would communicate with me only through public records requests, and that is the only way I could get my questions answered. And when I did submit the public records request that they told me to submit, and I submitted hundreds because I had hundreds of questions, my school board then put my name on the agenda of a public school board meeting and held a public school board meeting to discuss suing me for submitting the request that they told me to submit. In a 5-hour-long school board meeting, they openly debated my moral character, my political motivations. They said that I was causing chaos, wreaking havoc, harming the district, harming children. One school board member even said she felt unsafe and started to cry because, as you see, I'm really scary standing here right now. And they really just tarred and feathered me for asking questions. And they had never met me before, and this was the first school board meeting that I had ever been to in my life. They wanted to send a message to other parents that if you ask questions, they will come after you. Well, at the end of this meeting, they decided that they wouldn't sue me for asking questions because they never intended on actually suing me. They just wanted to publicly humiliate me in a school board meeting that was a show trial. And when that happened, then the teachers union, the largest teachers union in the country, the NEA, did file a lawsuit against me to bully me and harass me with frivolous litigation and to send a message to other parents that if you ask questions about public education, they will come after you.
So listen, I'm very grateful that there's a kindergartner in Rhode Island that has a mom like that. Amen? And it gets worse. This is a couple of exchanges that took place with the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, Merrick Garland, in a hearing in the Senate this week. First Ted Cruz, then Josh Hawley asking the question. Watch this. Now, look, I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you that when you get a witness, well, watch what happens, and you can understand why lawyers sometimes have heart attacks and die early because of having to deal with this nonsense all the time.
Now, of course, you're prosecuting that individual for attempted murder, but did you bring even a single case to enforce this law, or did the Department of Justice decide this law doesn't apply if it's harassing justices for an opinion we don't like?
When the Dobbs draft was leaked, I did something no Attorney General in the history of the department had ever done before. For the first time in history, I ordered United States Marshals 24/7 to defend every residence of every justice.
Well, Garland, as a judge, you're familiar with asking counsel to answer a question.
I am answering.
Has the Department of Justice enforced this statute? Have you brought a single case against any of these protesters threatening the justices under 18 U.S.C. Section 1507? Have you brought even one?
Senator, you asked me whether I sat on my hands, and quite the opposite. I sent 70 United States Marshals.
Let me try again.
To defend.
Has the Department of Justice brought even a single case under this statute? It's a yes/no question. It's not a give a speech on the other things you did.
The job of the United States Marshals is to defend the lives of
the answer is no.
Is to defend the lives of the justices, and that's their number one priority. They have.
Why are you unwilling to say no? The answer is no. You know it's no. I know it's no. Everyone in this hearing room knows it's no. You're not willing to answer a question. Have you brought a case under this statute? Yes or no?
As far as I know, we haven't, and what we have done is defended the lives of the justices with over 70 U.S. Marshals.
How do you decide which criminal statutes the DOJ enforces and which one it doesn't?
The United States Marshals know that they have full authority.
I recognize you want to give a separate speech.
No, I don't want to
How do you decide which statutes you enforce and which ones you don't?
The Marshals on scene make that determination in light of the priority of defense.
The Marshals do not make a determination over whether to prosecute. You, the Attorney General, make a determination, and you spent 20 years as a judge, and you're perfectly content with justices being afraid for their children's lives, and you did nothing to prosecute it. Let's shift to another area.
Can I answer the question?
No, you cannot. You have refused to answer the question.
I am answering your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, let me just ask you, does your department have a problem with anti-Catholic bias?
Our department protects all religions and all ideologies. It does not have any bias against any religion of any kind.
Well, you could have surprised me, because given the resources that you are expending and the apparently intelligence assets that you are deploying against Catholics, it appears, and other people of faith, while simultaneously turning a blind eye while people are executed gang style in the streets of our cities, including in my home state, your answer frankly surprises me. Let's talk about the Mark Houck case, for example. You've been asked about this already today, and frankly, your answers really astound me. This is a case where a Catholic pro-life demonstrator, father, was accused of disorderly conduct in front of an abortion center. The local prosecutor, the Philadelphia district attorney, who is a Democrat, a liberal, very progressive, declined to prosecute. There was a private suit that got dismissed. And then after all of that, your Justice Department sent between 20 and 30 armed agents in the early morning hours to the Houck's private residence to arrest this guy after he had offered to turn himself in voluntarily. Here's the photo. Once again, you can see the long guns, you can see the ballistic shields, you can see that they're wearing bulletproof vests. Why did the Justice Department do this? Why did you send 20 to 30 SWAT-style agents and a SWAT-style team to this guy's house when everybody else had declined to prosecute and he'd offered to turn himself in?
Determinations of how to make arrests under arrest warrants are made based by the tactical operators in the district. They are not.
But you surely looked into it by this point, right? You know the answer, surely.
All I know is what the FBI has said, which is that they made decisions on the ground as to what was safest and easiest. So you do not agree with your description of what happened on the scene.
You don't agree with my description. I'm pointing out what the photo is. There are agents here who have long guns and ballistic shields. Let's take a look at the hardened criminals that your Justice Department sent these armed agents to go terrorize on that morning. Here they are. Here they are at Mass. Here's the 7 children with Mr. Houck and his wife. In this early morning, they were all at home. Mrs. Houck has said repeatedly the children were screaming. They feared for their lives. You got these agents demanding that he come out. They've got the guns, she said, pointing at the house and at them. He has offered to turn himself in. And this is who you go to terrorize. What's really interesting to me is this seems to directly contradict your own memorandum about the use of force at the Justice Department. You say officers may use only the force that is objectively reasonable to effectively control an incident. Are you telling me that in your opinion as Attorney General, it was objectively necessary to use 20 or 30 SWAT-style agents with long guns and ballistic shields for these people?
What I'm saying is that decisions about how to go about this were made on the ground by FBI agents.
So you're saying you don't know?
I'm saying what I just said.
Which is that you're abdicating responsibility?
I'm not abdicating responsibility.
Then give me the answer. Do you think, in your opinion, you are the Attorney General of the United States? You are in charge of the Justice Department. And yes, sir, you are responsible. So give me an answer.
The FBI does not agree with your description.
I'm not asking about the FBI. You are the Attorney General. Give me your answer. Do you think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines in sending 20 to 30 armed agents to terrorize these people? Yes or no?
The facts I have, which are those presented by the FBI, are not consistent with your description.
So you think it was reasonable?
I'm saying the facts are not as you describe.
What, that the children weren't there? That there weren't long guns there? That there weren't agents? What do you dispute? What's the factual premise you dispute? Be specific.
FBI said they don't agree with your description of...
Be specific. They don't agree with what?
Of how many agents, of the agents who were there, and of what their roles were. They don't agree.
Do you know the jury in this case acquitted Mr. Houck? I'm sure you're aware. Do you know how long it took him?
I am aware, and we respect the decision of the jury.
Do you know how long it took him?
I don't know.
1 hour.
So this is what's happening. Biden administration is colluding with corporate censors to blacklist dissidents. This is a Washington Examiner article. Disinformation Inc. Meet the groups hauling in cash to secretly blacklist conservative news. They're having their accounts shut off. I think Donald Trump Jr. had his PNC Bank shut his account off yesterday for his media site. My friends, I'm telling you that I don't care whether you like the Trumps or not, okay? There's a bigger issue here about what's going on. And this is where I depart from some of my friends, for example, in Israel on the judicial reform. Everybody for decades has agreed in Israel that they need some kind of judicial reform. The question is how much? And so right-wing government comes in, it makes some proposals, probably going overboard, and the whole world melts down. And I can find you clips of Yair Lapid, who's now calling for civil war. IDF former commanders who are saying you should not obey orders of this government. That's happening. Business leaders say, oh, we can't have judicial reform in Israel. Okay, so let's compromise on it, okay? I saw a video of Yair Lapid this week. I asked somebody in Israel, it's in Hebrew, was he calling for judicial reform? It was from a number of years ago. Yep. But maybe not as much as the right-wing government is trying now. Okay, that's fine. But you need to understand that this is an issue. So they have this website, Global Disinformation Index, and they've set things up, and they're trying to get people shut down financially. In Tennessee, they have this. This is from Tennessee, Conservative Tennessee, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Tennessee Medical Center. And it says, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, are not only moral imperatives. Who's legislating morality now? You big fat hypocrites. Are not only moral imperatives, excuse me, they may be in shape, okay? Big fat is a metaphor, okay? But business imperatives for our organization and values embraced by our people, whether they are entering the workplace or accessing our health system. You better be on board with this, or we're not going to take care of you. And so there's a report that comes out about DEI programs and what they're doing. So big issue. So I'm going to try to truncate this a little bit because I'm tired of talking. So we have a very complicated situation. This is a graphic I made up a couple months ago. This is Syria and all the people on the ground in Syria. You have Iran, you have Russia, you have Turkey to the north, you have the U.S. in the northeast, you have the oil fields there along the Euphrates River, oil and gas, and it's a mess. And so what Israel's been doing is they've done hundreds of these strikes where they've gone in, they usually, because Russia is effectively in control of the airspace in Syria, Israel, they have a working arrangement, and they say, hey, we're going to take out a building. And I don't know how specific they get. They may give them the coordinates. They may say it's in this region. Make sure you don't have any of your Russian guys there. And there was a time when the Syrian military shot down a Russian plane. And Russia came out with I've played the graphic a number of times here. They came out with this computerized graphics to show, well, it was really Israel's fault because they were hiding behind our troop transport and got shot down and 19 Russians killed. So there was an attack in Damascus about 10 days ago, rocket strike. And what they did was they took out a group of people meeting there in Damascus, Iranians, who were there to discuss drones. And so this is a big deal. So Israel strikes Iran, hits a drone factory. They hit the drone hierarchy, people from Iran that are in Syria, take out 5 of them. And Russia's not happy. Russia's getting on Israel's case. Russia's also going, well, here's the article from the Wall Street Journal a week ago. Friday, drones are giving Ukraine a wartime edge. This is very interesting, the way they're using artificial intelligence and computerized programming and satellite targeting and that type of thing. And what's happening is Ukraine is able to punch above its weight, as they would say. Well, I don't know how long it'll last. There's a thing, people are running out. And Russia's been very stark in what they've said is, like, if we lose, this may go nuclear. And Alexander Dugin, Putin gave a speech many years ago, probably 2017 at the Valdai Discussion Club, 2017 or 18, in which he said, listen, you know, if we feel threatened, we'll use nukes. And we'll go to heaven and you'll all go to hell. That's what he said. I'm not making it up, okay? So listen, I don't think the people are trying to escalate the war in Ukraine are our friends, and I don't think Putin's our friend. And I'm equally dismissive of all of them. Nobody has our best interests at heart. But this article talks about, consider the humble drone, even as Russia has used Iranian-made drones to attack Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Ukraine has repurposed cheap commercial drones for use on the battlefield. Jury-rigged commercial drones typically carry small payloads over short distances, but they're cheap and can take out heavy enemy equipment. And this is changing the way warfare is done. And I've asked the question, when it says they come up against the land like a cloud in Ezekiel 38:39, is there drones, missile technology involved in that? Maybe not even, you know, human-powered aircraft or human-flown aircraft. It's kind of interesting. So Alexander Dugin, I've talked about him a lot for probably a decade, often referred to as Putin's brain. He's very anti-West. He thinks the West is morally bankrupt, and he may be right. But his goal is total annihilation of the West and Russia acceding to the place that he thinks they deserve. And so here's an interview that he gave on Al Arabiya. There's no sound on this, so you don't need to turn it up. But he's talking about this, and I'll read you what he says. That's Dugin right there. His daughter was killed in a car bomb. This is very dangerous war since Russia cannot lose it. This can bring Russia to its end. Russia cannot say, fine, we will give up the areas we have taken over. Such a thing would lead to a domestic explosion, and Russia would find itself in a civil war. This was just a couple weeks ago, February 23rd. Since a single step backwards would lead to 1,000 steps backwards. Russia will fight to the end because we simply cannot stop. We cannot lose, and we will not be satisfied until Ukraine is fully liberated from the pro-NATO political elites, regardless of the cost. This is what we will consider a victory. Russia itself will not use nuclear weapons, so it has no reason to threaten nuclear war. But, however, there will be such a threat if Russia begins to lose. In such a case, Russia may use nuclear weapons. So if Russia is allowed to win the war, do you see how this would still constitute victory for the West and a defeat for Russia? Except Russia would survive and humanity would be saved. However, in either scenario, there will be no Ukraine. It will disappear if we win, and it will disappear along with all of humanity if a nuclear apocalypse begins. Even if we imagine Ukrainian victory after so many people die and the infrastructure is completely destroyed, no one will be ready to rebuild this huge country. Therefore, Ukraine does not actually exist. If only we had refrained from destroying the Soviet Union, or had broken the necks of Gorbachev and Yeltsin at the right time. In my opinion, the West is the source of absolute evil. It uses artificial intelligence to destroy the family, sex, and the nature of human beings. I believe that Muslims understand me well, because I believe that the West is the Antichrist. Putin does not think so at all. He sees the West as a partner who behaves very aggressively for whatever reason. Now we are at war with the West because its ally decided to fight us. But if the West did not decide to fight us, we would be supplying it with cheap oil and gas. So there was a report, now this came out of a Norway defense report, that Russia had tactical nukes on ships in the Arctic. They came out later and said, well, that was a misinterpretation of our report, And you can download the report Focus 2023 from the Norwegian Defense Forces, and they've got some great graphics in here. They talk about the Arctic and tactical weapons. Here's what they say about Ukrainian-Russian doctrine will still be based on surprise and initiative. A key aspect of Russian military doctrine is speed, preemptive strike with the aim of knocking out critical targets far inside enemy territory. For Ukraine, like that anomaly, the weaker party, it proved decisive with mobility and proliferation of critical defense installations as anti-aircraft. So anyway, this war is going to go on for a while. They've surrounded Bakhmut. The Wagner group commander said that they are ready to take it out. It's going to be a war. There are reports that Putin is ready to send in wave after wave of humans that may be killed. And so, look, this has a much bigger deal to it. This is an article in today's London Times. Putin has stolen our children. They talk somewhere between, by estimates, 17,000 and 300,000 Ukrainian children have been taken to Russia. Some in camps. This one lady said she was able to get her daughter back after several months of her and she had to travel to meet her in Crimea. She had to travel, I believe it was 8,100 kilometers, going to Poland and down through Moldova and these type of things. Now there's been a coup in Moldova. Romania is putting troops on its border. I mean, we really are on the verge of World War III, or if not in World War III. And this article from the Wall Street Journal, war's end would bring an energy shock. In other words, we end the war and then everything's still going to fall apart. I mean, so we live at this very critical time in human history. Here's a little graphic of how the war has gone over the last year. And you can see Ukrainian counteroffensive is in blue, Russian occupied is in yellow, Russian advances are in orange. And you can kind of see how this has gone. And remember, we were told by a lot of people, this is going to be over in a few days, then it was a couple weeks, then it's 3 months. And now I watch some pro-Russian people and they say, well, boy, Russia's the greatest humanitarian army in history. It's the West who commits all the atrocities. And I see this one guy, he lives in some city in Ukraine and he puts up videos and he's interesting to listen to, but you dig into a social media account and you will find some of the most vile, vicious, it's all the Jews' fault stuff on his social media pages. And I see Christians posting his stuff. It's garbage. You got to use a little bit of discernment. It's okay. I don't care if you're pro-Russian or not, but it's dividing everybody. So this is where we stood as of a couple weeks ago. It's a big deal. And they show here where most of the support is coming from. At the bottom, you see the top destinations for Ukrainian refugees, Poland, Germany, and Czech Republic getting the most. I think Poland has gotten 1.6 million refugees. And then financial support, you see here at the top, military, financial, humanitarian, and everything. The vast majority of that's coming from the United States, EU, Germany, and Poland, and the UK. So, this is Bakhmut. You see this. I want to just show you. I mean, this is just Zelensky. He's running around saying everything's going to be good. This is an article in The Atlantic. The war in Ukraine is the end of a world. A shroud is settling over the dreams many of us had at the end of the 20th century. The war in Ukraine is the final shovel of dirt on the grave of any optimism about the world order that was born with the fall of Soviet communism. Now we are faced with the long grind of defeating Moscow's armies and eventually rebuilding a better world. And I think that's what's sort of behind this, is that and it's causing all sorts of geopolitical situations. But if you dig into, I've played that Ukraine 2030 video a number of times. There are even publications that talk about that, that I've shared with you. And I think I try to boil it down because some of it just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me that Putin's moving closer to the borders of Europe when he claims that Europe was too close to his borders, so now I'm going to move closer to them. There's an insanity on both sides of this, and I think that some of the elites in the world, like our government, people in charge of our government, they think that Ukraine is a test case. We're going to build the best utopian society on the planet. Go look up my videos where I played that Ukraine, or look up Ukraine 2030 on Twitter, and you'll find that video. It's pretty amazing. Russia halts pipeline oil to Poland. And then again, this is that article from the Wall Street Journal. Even if an end to war in Ukraine is imminent, energy producers need to consider the possibility before they invest in long-term projects. Everything is a mess. Now, the other thing that happens is there's this relationship between Ukraine and Russia and Iran in Ukraine. And here's CIA Director William Burns on, I think this is CBS. Anyway, this is what he had to say about the Ukrainian nuclear threat.
You've said in the past there's beginnings of a full-fledged defense partnership between Russia and Iran. Exactly how far does the alliance go?
Well, it's moving at a pretty fast clip in a very dangerous direction right now, in the sense that we know that the Iranians have already provided hundreds of armed drones to the Russians, which they're using to inflict pain on Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. We know that they've provided ammunition for artillery and for tanks as well. And what we also see are signs that Russia is proposing to help the Iranians on their missile program, and also at least considering the possibility of providing fighter aircraft to Iran as well. That creates obvious risk, not only for the people of Ukraine, and we've seen the evidence of that already, but also risk to our friends and partners across the Middle East as well. So it's, quite disturbing set of developments.
Have Iran's leaders made the decision to pursue a nuclear weapon?
To the best of our knowledge, we don't believe that the supreme leader in Iran has yet made a decision to resume the weaponization of program that we judge that they suspended or stopped at the end of 2003. But the other two legs of the stool, meaning enrichment programs, have obviously advanced very far.
84% purity, reportedly.
They've advanced very far to the point where it would only be a matter of weeks before they could enrich to 90% if they chose to cross that line. And also in terms of their missile systems, their ability to deliver a nuclear weapon once they developed it has also been advancing as well. So the answer to your question is no, we don't see evidence that they made a decision to resume.
Well, and then Turkey, Erdogan is in bad political situation because of the damage to some of the buildings in Turkey. Look at some of these videos before and after what happened in these series of earthquakes. Here's before, here's after, same street. Well done. I forget where I got this. Oh, The Guardian. Look at this. Death toll is now up to around 60,000 people, I believe. The damage is, and they're still digging out. This is a stadium that was used for refugees, tents. So it's somebody did a great job on that footage. I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, the lives of many people ended, tens of thousands. And who knows what the death toll number is going to be. It could be over 100,000. I don't think that would be out of the question. I'll just show a couple. I mean, this is the blessing and curse of modern technology, that you can see these things. So these earthquakes. Here's a footage of some apartment buildings in one of the cities that was really kind of on the edge of the earthquake zone. I think this comes from the Financial Times, did a really good article on it about how, I mean, this is a city of about 1.5 or more million people. There were these brand new apartment buildings. You can see them there. They're sort of laying on, they like fell over on their side. Here's another clip. See the apartment buildings coming into view there? They were like the buildings behind. And there's criminal charges being brought. You can see them collapse there. This is what they look like when they were being built. And Financial Times has a great thing, and Erdogan's losing a lot of support. At the same time, Iraq now is saying their waters are plunging, water levels are plunging. On the Euphrates, Turkey's Ataturk Dam has an even larger capacity of 27 billion cubic meters, approaching the volume of the river's annual flow. Now, where you get this prophetically is Turkey could shut off all the water through these dams to Iraq. It does say, does it not, in Bible prophecy, that the rivers will be dried up. Now, I don't know if that's supernatural or natural. I'm just saying is now Turkey could do that. And they have been doing it, and it's affecting the economy in Iraq. This is an article. I've talked a lot about this, from Twitter spats to island disputes. Egypt and Saudi Arabia have a bone to pick with each other. If you remember, there were the Tiran Straits. There were a couple islands there that were to be given back to Egypt by Saudi Arabia, but this is being delayed. They're sort of near Neom, that big 100-mile-long city or building or whatever it is that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is building. Lot of things. I'm going to talk about this in a more detail in a later update. This is a strategic analysis for Israel 2023. Israel among the world's democracies. Oh, there it is. I lost my mouse cursor. This is the legal reform. Some people are calling for a new constitution for Israel. They don't really have one. This is what one lawyer said. The primary aim is to try to take advantage of what we refer to as a constitutional moment. It seems that there might be an opportunity, even in times of crisis, to reestablish Israel's constitutional identity. I think this is a guy who's got a compromise in mind. The argument is that if you want to take the Constitution out of the court, so to speak, you need to have a constitution. You need some alternative. And so what happens now is Israel, they don't really have a constitution. They have basic laws. And the Supreme Court, about 30 years ago, came out with an opinion that it was a standard of reason, a test of reasonableness as to whether certain laws should stand or fall, or whether certain people should be serving in the Knesset. And so now there are petitions, and anybody can bring a petition, and the courts will hear them. So they're trying to get Netanyahu out. They're trying to get Ben Gvir out. They already got one of the guys out of the cabinet. And the problem is that the legislature, they don't have two houses like we do. There's no checks and balances. But there's no check and balance on the court either, and that's what people are complaining about. Tech firms have decried this. Here's just a brief clip. This is the French ambassador interviewed on CNN by Christiane Amanpour. I look at her body language when she's asking these questions of the Israeli ambassador to France.
So let me ask you, I reported that 105 at least former Israeli diplomats did send a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the coalition assumed office, warning about Israel's global status and standing if the independent judiciary was compromised. Do you agree with that? And if so, in what way do you think Israel's global status might be compromised?
Well, first of all, I do appreciate this letter, and I would have signed this letter should they ask me. And they're absolutely right to warn the government against what's going to be a tsunami against Israel. But I would like to really to point out that what we are doing now in Israel, and the reason that I came back, is because we are now fighting for our character. The character of Israel is a country, is a Jewish and democratic country, and we are now fighting for our democracy. And we won't let anyone change this character.
Okay. Well, first I want to ask you, what do you mean about a tsunami coming against Israel? What kind of tsunami? From where?
Diplomatic.
From what? From the world? From
all the country that cherish, love, and have relations with Israel, because Israel is the only democracy in our region. It's one of our treasures, the democracy. And now if we are going to lose it, we are going to lose a lot in the public opinion of the world.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has said the following to CNN about what he's doing. He's basically saying it's no different than in many other parts of the world. Here's what he said. Take a listen.
Here's a country that has exactly this provision. It's called Canada. Is Canada not a democracy? Is Britain not a democracy? Is New Zealand not a democracy? Because they all either have this provisions of such a provision or have no ability of the court to strike down laws.
So how do you answer that? What is so different from the provisions that his government is trying to ram through?
Well, first of all, I don't like to argue with my prime minister. Maybe I would like to do it, but I would like to do it here in Israel and not through CNN. But I have to answer that you can't compare Canada to Israel. Canada has a constitution. Canada has 2 parliaments. We don't have it. But on the other side, we've got a declaration of democracy that is, as I said, this is our ID. And Netanyahu doesn't have the right to change it.
And obviously also in terms of, well, I guess for you all it's domestic policy, for the US it's international policy, the idea of the 2-state solution, the increase in settlement units that the Prime Minister has just approved and announced. We know that the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, along with others, have been very, very upset about this. And it came right after Blinken's trip, after he asked the Prime Minister not to take unilateral steps. So Blinken has said, we're deeply troubled by Israel's decision yesterday to advance reportedly nearly 10,000 settlement units. Like previous administrations, Democratic and Republican, we strongly oppose such unilateral measures which exacerbate tensions and undermine the prospects for a negotiated 2-state solution. I know there's been a lot of violence on both sides, but I want to know from you as a diplomat, is there any hope for anything resembling negotiations on a 2-state solution, given that the settlements and the settlement believers are emboldened by now their backers who are in government?
Well, first of all, I would like to remind you the outstanding speech of our previous Prime Minister, Yair Lapid, in the UN, where he laid down the 2-state solution. Very
Okay, I mean, this is where we're going. And this is Thomas Friedman in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, I guess 3 weeks ago, 46 words. Biden sends a clear message to Israel. This is what Biden said in response to a request by Tom Friedman. And this is talking about settlements, two-state solution, and the judicial reform going on. And this is the U.S. president weighing in on how the internal politics of Israel is going. This is really unprecedented. Well, except Obama did it. So you would expect Biden to continue in the tradition of the Biden administrations that we've been under for a while. Biden said this: the genius of American democracy and Israeli democracy is that they are both built on strong institutions, on checks and balances, on an independent judiciary. Building consensus for fundamental changes is really important to ensure that the people buy into it so they can be sustained. This is the guy who hired Merrick Garland. I'll repeat what I said before. I'm glad I'm an old man. So here's a clip about, I'll end with this. This is on Israel Channel 7, Jonathan Hessen, and some security experts talking about, what's the impact of the war on Ukraine on the whole thing. And I promise this is the last thing for sure. You could bring a steak to me and say, I can only eat it if I go longer. I will not go longer. So here is Israel Channel 7 about a day ago talking about this. I thought this was a pretty good discussion.
In light of the war of Ukraine, in our next episode that will be broadcast on Tuesday, but I'd like to ask you, Mr. Oren, as we're looking at this Ukrainian-Russian arena, of course, Russia has been engaged in this territory in multiple wars for millennia. And as such, I'd like to ask you, when we really look at what can all of this mean, what are the implications for the Mideast, something that we can draw out of this, and both General Cohen and, of course, General Gavish have noted this, is the tightening relations between Russia and Iran on the one hand, which obviously also alters its policy to a certain degree, because we see a deepening of relations that also has its implications for Syria. Israel is looking at this, of course, very closely, but it also understands that the way things are being conducted in Ukraine and with the various contenders being somewhat larger in scale than what Israel is, it might not necessarily also mean the same for what we may face in the near future. Just to give a picture, if the same quantity of munitions would be used in a day, as is the case in the Ukraine-Russian war, we would ultimately, or Hezbollah would deplete its arsenals within 3 days.
So some lessons are universal, regardless of the...
I'm not sure if that point came through clearly, but what Jonathan was saying is that Russia's been shooting artillery into Ukraine at a massive amount. If Hezbollah shot at the same rate, they would deplete their 150, 200,000 rockets in 3 days. But the problem is, how does the West respond to this? Because we're shipping all of our arms over to Ukraine. And some of them, they're saying, we're not going to be able to reproduce what we've shipped over there until like 2032. This is not good by any stretch of the imagination. This is a former Israeli, I can't remember his name, Israeli security man, and he's going to talk a little bit about the depletion of arms.
Terrain or the threat assessment or the scenario. For instance, if you talk about national stamina, it is basically the same when you analyze Russia in Ukraine or a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan, even though the Russian invasion is obviously by land forces. They have a common border, actually 2 borders from Belarus too. And if China were to invade or at least harass Taiwan, it would be a naval and air campaign mostly. until they manage to get forces in country. So it doesn't really matter whether it's armor or Air Force and Navy when you look at the highest strategic level. But you are right. It's sometimes boring to talk about logistics. And if you asked General Cohen when he was a colonel, for instance, whether he prefers to be chief of logistics for the Israeli Defense Forces or to lead troops in combat, we know what his answer would have been. But without logistics and acquisition and research and development and money, there would be no war. And what we saw here is the American term drawdown. They have taken from their own arsenals stuff which will be needed if there is another crisis now. Now, in the Yom Kippur War, when they did it, there was some resistance from the Department of Defense, both the civilian echelon and commanders, who had to sign for their readiness. Had the Soviets attacked in West Germany during the Yom Kippur War, the commanders would have been at fault for not having the material. And the Americans have given the Ukrainians $32 billion worth of munitions, some of which were produced specifically for that, but most of which were taken from stocks. So the so-called arsenal of democracy has been depleted. And if Israel is in need, we may not see enough stocks of Iron Dome interceptor missiles or...
This is a very important lesson learned. I think that people need to understand this. The quantities of munitions currently available in the West are depleted. And this is something that Israel might find itself on its own facing the eastern and northern arena.
But not only that, obviously with precision-guided munitions, you can hit your targets more accurately and avoid non-combatant casualties. But they are so expensive that after a couple of days, you run out of money.
You run out of weapons, you run out of money. So North Korea facing famine, demographic collapse, logistics, acceleration, convergence, logistics understanding. So I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but the world's in a lot of turmoil. I mean, Israel's facing it from a couple sides. Very serious, because we have forward deployed ammunition stores in Israel. Those are being sent to Ukraine. We did leave, what was it, about $80 billion worth of stuff behind in Afghanistan. You don't remanufacture that. So anyway, so look, let's pray. I will try to do a midweek this week. And if you want to check out my sermon from First Hour, please feel free to do so. It's on the FB Chapel, Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel, and also on Rumble, Real FBC. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word, your guidance, Lord. I pray that you will help all of us to prepare our hearts to stand firm in the face of what appears to be coming persecution. Help us to do whatever we do to stand firm in the faith and to act in such a way that you are glorified and that people can see the light of the gospel through our actions. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.